Who else in here had to read the Scarlet Letter in school? Most of us. Did you teach English, Ruthie?
I did not.
Okay. Did you ever do Scarlet Letter? Did you ever teach?
Scarlet Letter in high school, yeah.
Okay. So if you know anything about the story of the Scarlet Letter, I had to read it, and I confess I didn't love it, but I still remember the message. Like, even though I didn't necessarily, like, it was one of those books I was like, but I really remember the message. And for those of you who it's been a year or two since we read it, just a little reminder, it takes place in the 1600s in Puritan, Massachusetts. And this woman, Hester Prynne, was married, but she was living there without her husband. And she gets pregnant. And everyone's like, oh, you're married and your husband's not around, you're pregnant. So obviously, you have had sex with someone outside of marriage, you've committed adultery. And so they arrest her. It's a crime punishable up to death. They could choose to kill her for this. And so after they let her have the baby, she's in jail, and they set her up, they bring her in front of the whole town, and they put her up on this like pedestal, this scaffolding thing, and they publicly accuse her of adultery in front of the whole town is there, yelling, like calling her names and I imagine they're throwing tomatoes and that kind of stuff. And the magistrate or the mayor or whatever, he is like, you're a terrible person and sin is infectious and you shouldn't do this. And he's yelling at her and they're trying to get her to give up who her baby daddy is, and she won't do it. And so I took a little clip from the movie. There's Demi Moore did the movie again, but I like this older version because Demi Moore, in true Demi Moore fashion, kind of like has that look like, I don't care. But this woman looks really like, oh man, like she feels it. So hopefully you can hear that. I tried to turn on the closed captioning, but I don't know if it works. So let's see what happens.
Let us stand there in her shamelessness, and as you gaze upon her face, and on the scarlet letter on her breast, and on the babe held in her arms, instruct yourselves from what you see. We live, the forest on our threshold, in a wilderness filled with pleasure, with sounds and
It's kind of hard because they have the two dialogues going on at the same time, but actually the man who's asking the questions is her husband, who's come back from far away. And he asks the man, what did she do? And then he says, well, what was this all the punishment she'll get standing here and being shamed? And they're like, actually, if they give her the full extent of the law, it's death. The full extent of the law for her for committing adultery was death. And we, in today's culture, are like, that's crazy. I mean, how many people do we know who have gotten pregnant without our husband? Without a husband. Lots and lots. In our culture, this is normal. We don't think anything of it. But in 1600 Puritan America, that was a big deal. That was a capital S sin. And so her punishment, if you've read the book, is she has to wear a scarlet S embroidered on her clothing for the rest of her life. She is sentenced to a life of shame. She, for the rest of her life, she wears a scarlet A for adultery. She has to wear it for the rest of her life. So that for the rest of her life, wherever she goes, everyone can see that she's an adulteress. And if you've read the book, she's shunned the rest of her life. So she's a single woman she's a seamstress. She gets a little bit of work, but she lives very on the fringes of society. No one will be her friend. No one will talk to her. Even her daughter is shunned because she's a bastard child. And so even though she's allowed to still live out among society, she's basically given a life of solitary confinement for one sin. And even in our culture, I feel like we have this thing where we choose certain sins, and they're the big A sins, the big S sins. Oh, the people who do that, they're bad. And they get shunned. And there are so many people, and I get frustrated in the church because the reason a lot of people don't come to church is because they feel like they're wearing a giant scarlet S for sinner. And if I come into church, I'd be struck by lightning. People think that if you're a sinner, you're not welcome in church. And it's because our culture still does what they did there. There's certain people and certain sins that we like to put up on the pedestal. That's bad. And we all stand around talking about those terrible people who do that terrible thing, whatever that sin is, those drug addicts, those adulterers, those people who cheat, those people who are liars, whatever. We put these big letter S's, and we sentence people to a life of being labeled as this bad person, this terrible person, and we don't want to talk to them, and we push them away. What's crazy to me that this story takes place in Puritan. The Puritans believed in Jesus, and this is the exact same story that happens in the Bible. If you've ever read the Bible, there's a story that's literally this story. It happens in John 8. That's one place we see it. It says the teachers of the law, so these are the high and mighty, churchy Jewish people. They brought a woman caught in adultery, and they made her stand before a group, and they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses, he commands us to stone a woman. What do you say?" So just like they were doing with Hester, the Pharisees did the same thing to Jesus. They grabbed a woman who's, I think it's ironic that in this story, they caught her in the act of adultery, so adultery is two people. Well, they only brought the woman. So they drag her in the front of all these people, and they're ready to kill her because that's what the law says. And they say to Jesus, "Oh, you're this big teacher, you know who God is, and what do you say we should do?" And I love what Jesus does. He says they were using this question to trap him so they could accuse him, but Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. I imagine it was like sandy soil, and he's writing, drawing. He doesn't say anything. And so they keep saying, "But Jesus, what do you think we should do?" And he says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." And then he stooped down and kept writing in the ground. He's waiting to see what they do. And you know what? They all started to leave. They all recognized that they're sinners too. It says, at this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the oldest ones first. The wisest of them were like, "Oh, snap, he's right." And then Jesus looks up, and everybody's gone. And it's just this woman. I imagine her like Hester, standing in front of all these people, or she's all disheveled because they just caught her in the act of adultery. He says, "Where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She says, "No one." And he says, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and leave your life of sin." You know, so many people think so many people who think they're the Hester prince. I mean, I'll call this woman in the story Hester because we don't have her name. So many people in this world out there think they're Hester prince with this giant letter A or the giant S for sin on their chest. They can't come to church because Jesus will judge them. Jesus will say they're bad people. Jesus will reject them. But instead, Jesus says, everybody deserves an S, Hester. An S for sinner. Everybody deserves a scarlet letter. If there's even one person out there who doesn't deserve one, let them throw the stone. I'm not going to condemn you. That's not my job. I'm not here to condemn. I am here to bring hope and healing. And I just love that story. And I wish more people understood that that's who Jesus is. Jesus is not the condemner. Jesus isn't the accuser. That's the enemy. Jesus comes to heal and say, he didn't say what you did was okay. He said, stop doing it. But he's not judging and condemning her. You know, so many people in the church, so many Christians, people who say that we're Christians, we like to believe that there's the big capital S sins and then the little bitty S's. And we're okay with having the little bitty S's. Oh, it's okay to lie. It's okay to gossip. I just stretched the truth a little. But Jesus came because a lot of people in Jesus' day thought the same thing. There are these capital S sins, and then there's the little s sins. And I might do the little s sins, but it's okay because this is a little guy. And so if you think that, I challenge you to read Matthew 5. So let's take a little sin test today, shall we? I want you to imagine the patch, the red letter S. We'll use S for sinner. We'll imagine the red letter S. So Jesus says, oh, you've heard it said that people shall not murder, and anyone who murders is subject to judgment. And I think we can all agree that murderers should be judged, and murderers are bad, and that's a sin. And I'm sure, I imagine none of us have committed murder, because we'd probably not be here, we'd be in prison. Okay? So we all think we're good people because we haven't murdered. But Jesus says, oh, but let me tell you, anyone who is even angry with a brother or sister is subject to judgment. Any one of you who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have absolutely called people a fool. Maybe not to their face, because I'm a chicken. But behind their backs, I have said, I can't believe that they did that. They're so stupid, and I can't believe that they do this, and I get all mad. I'm like, they're ridiculous, and they shouldn't do it like that. And I get all mad, and I say, these people are terrible people. And Jesus is like, oh, you say that? Well, now you're a murderer too. Slap on your big letter S, because you're now a sinner. Ouch. Or here's this one. You heard it said you should not commit adultery. I think we can all agree that you should not go have sex with people outside of your marriage. But I tell you that if you even look at a woman lustfully, you have committed adultery with her in your heart. So for those people who are married or single, because if you're single, they're not your spouse, right? But you have entertained lustful thoughts. You've looked at someone and been like, hey, whew, and you have imagined what it might be like to be with that person. Put on your big letter S, you're a sinner too. Some of us are probably already thinking, Stephanie, I don't do that. I'm a nice person, I don't murder people, and I've never committed adultery. Okay. There's 6 things the Lord hates. It's from Proverbs 6. I imagine if the Lord hates it, it's a sin. It doesn't say that it's a sin, but I imagine if the Lord hates it, it's a sin. 7 that they're detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil. Haughty eyes is looking down on people. So all those people at Hester's trial had haughty eyes. That guy standing there accusing her, haughty eyes. So he was doing something that's detestable to the Lord. Lying tongue. How many of us have stretched the truth at some point in our lives? You know, right? Put your big letter S on. Hands that shed innocent blood. Hopefully none of you guys have done that. A heart that devises wicked schemes. How many of you sat around thinking like, oh, I would love to get back, and you plot revenge, and you're plotting how someone's going to be taken down, and you might not do it, but you're sitting there thinking like, ooh, I would love if this bad thing happened to that person. Put on your letter S. Or people who are quick to rush into evil. That one's kind of harder to define. Here's another one. False witness. If anyone has lied about someone or stirs up conflict in the community. Man, go on Facebook. You'll see all kinds of people who deserve their letter S. They see a post and they're like, well, I can't believe they did this, and did you hear this? And they're like, social media. And they don't just do it on social media. When you stand around your people and you're like, did you hear that they did this? I can't believe it. And you start getting people riled up over a cause that you think is wrong, you're stirring up conflict in your community. Put your letter S on. And then, if you're still feeling like, Stephanie, I'm good, I don't do any of this, I got one more that'll get all of us. It gets me all the time. Exodus 31, you shall keep the Sabbath. Therefore, for it is a holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work, that person shall be cut off from their people. So same punishment that they wanted to give Hester, to be cut off from your people or put to death, that's what should happen to you if you don't keep a Sabbath. Work shall be done for 6 days, but on the seventh, that's a Sabbath and a holy day of rest. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath shall surely be put to death. No laundry, no errand running. Okay? How many of us truly every week take a full 24 hours where we don't do any work? Let me put on my big, I need like a S suit for that one, because I break that one all the time. And so some people might be thinking, some people already thought they were wearing their letter S for sinner. They have felt condemned by the people around them. And to those people I say the same thing that Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. Try to do better. And those of us who thought we were better, I would hope after our little sin test, you realize that you also deserve a big old letter S. And to those of us, I say, I don't condemn you. Jesus doesn't condemn you. Go and try to do better. That's the kind of Lord that we serve. No matter what sin you have done, and all of us have, you deserve love. God loves you. You can be the biggest puppy kicker. I always use that one because it's like a church-friendly bad sin that everybody can agree that if you kick puppies, you're a terrible person. You could be the biggest puppy kicker in the world, and still, Jesus says, I don't condemn you. Go and try to do better. That's the kind of God that we serve. And so your challenge for this week, I like to always give us a challenge. 1, go read Matthew 5 and let the Lord speak to you. Because when I read Matthew 5, I'm one of those people, I get to think like, I'm pretty good, Lord. I'm not really a sinner. I got it going. Like, I'm a good person. And then I read Matthew 5 and I'm like, oh, man, I am a savage. I am a sinner. I am a hot mess. I have no right or reason to boast or brag because I mess up all the time. I try to do better. I try to come to Jesus when I realize it and say, Lord Jesus, I'm sorry. And he says, I forgive you. Go try to do better. And I want you to have eyes this week as you're walking around. Look at people's countenance. How many people are walking around like Hester Prynne? How many people in our society, in our community, are walking around because society has put a big old letter S on their chest? How many people do you see that other people shun and don't talk to or speak badly of because they're a bad person? Talk to that person. The drug addicts, the people who you know have had affairs, the whatever sin that our society says is the bad sin, and people are pushing them out. Notice those people. And be more like Jesus, who says, I'm not condemning you. How you doing today? And maybe ask if you can pray for them. Whatever. We've got to stop being the accusers and recognize that we have no right to throw stones because we're sinners too. And all of God's people said, amen.